So thanks for everyone for coming. It's such a good turnout. This is the biggest turnout I've seen, including nationals. So well done. It's like 10 times the amount. Usually it was like my parents and my wife and people I dragged along. So Vanya talked to me about talking about competitions and their value. And so I started to think about it, and I think I have sort of a unique perspective because what's happened is I've competed for 7 years, so I've competed a very long time. At that point, the Starbucks mermaid still was topless, and Mike Strump had no facial hair. But it's allowed me to see the value of competition as a barista, and then when I moved into owning Monogram, it's allowed me to see the competition as a business owner, both in my own competitions, but also coaching people. So basically, what I want to talk about really quick is sort of go through the common complaints against competition, because I think these things, there are, I think, a handful of things that people say are bad aspects of competition, and I think they cycle and cycle and cycle. And so I think it's important to sort of speak to them directly. And then basically I'll sort of go through my own competition story and talk about how it's helped me. And I actually, from the start, I think that there's value in competition even if you don't win. Because it took me 5 years to win. I got second a bunch and lost a bunch and did poorly. And even then I saw value in it. So I think that's, if there's like one big take-home thing, I think that is sort of key. That you can find value in competition even if you don't win. So the first common complaint is that barista competitions have no application in cafes. This is, they'll watch a routine and be like, oh, that's a great routine. He's a competition barista, he's not a real like cafe barista, so it doesn't really work. And when I think about that, like, what are you trying to do in a competition? You're trying to steam milk consistently. You're trying to pour consistent latte art. You're trying to work clean. You have about 5 minutes to dial on the coffee. You can't waste any coffee, and you actually have to engage with customers or judges. If you look at that list, that is exactly what a barista is supposed to be. And I think a long time, for many people, they look at the signature drink and they say, that will never apply to a cafe. And I even think you can build signature drinks in cafe. But at the beginning, I would say that the set of skills that you need to do well in a barista competition applies directly to bar. And I think that should be really compelling for both business owners and for baristas. If you practice these things, you will do well in barista competitions, and you will become a better barista. Look at what baristas do in barista competitions. It is serving coffee. The other thing that I think people often bring up is that there's only value if you win. And I think that this comes, largely I think that for a long time, the Canadian coffee scene was dominated by Artigiano, and they did a very excellent job, and they really built their winning on, their platform on winning. And I think what has happened is baristas have seen only the value of winning. And I think that this is sort of not the way to look at it. I think you need to create consistent goals that make the competition more about winning. And on the other hand too, winning does not guarantee any sort of success. There's been years that I have won and really squandered my opportunity, just to be honest, that I didn't take the opportunities that were out there. So it's sort of two-sided, that you need to create goals. Like maybe your goal is, I learn how to make better coffee, or I meet people in the industry that inspire me. These are the things that happen in competition. It doesn't have to be I win and then I go get like a milk sponsorship or something like that. It can be a whole bunch of different things. This is the one that lots of shop owners bring up, and I think it's quite funny, is that if you support a barista, they will win and then they will leave. And I know I left Don Sebastian and started Monogram. That's a completely different topic, but that's like that's the late night show. But the way I look at it is you invest in people, and the coffee industry, as business owners, we're not always able to pay people what they're worth, in my opinion. Even if you pay a lot, I think people really are committing to coffee. And so the thing that we offer as business owners is the opportunity to learn. And I also think that as business owners, if you have standards of quality that you want met, you have to bring people up to those levels. And I view competition the exact same way. Like I wouldn't not train someone and say like, well, if I train her, she's gonna become a great barista and then be able to get a job somewhere else. And that's essentially what we're doing as business owners. If we don't support baristas in competition, is we need to empower them, because it's such a great tool for learning that I think it's really sort of counterintuitive to me that you will make your business stronger. The other thing that happens in these competitions is the entire time that I was competing for Phil and Sebastian, I was spending time with other baristas, coaching them, tasting. They would watch sets, we'd work on roasting, all these things. So even when that person's there, they exist there, but they're also spreading their knowledge. And the other thing as a business owner is you can actually still leverage that barista, even after they're long gone. Like I think my time spent with both Transcend and Phil and Sebastian, I think has, because they supported me and they invested in me, I think the community has recognized what they've done and view them as positive influencers in coffee because that they supported baristas that won. And I think Josh and Jeremy are examples of that as well. I think Burnwood's a good example of that. Rob's now with Hey Happy, but I think all these companies still have legacies of winning competition. So to any business owners that are here, I think investing in baristas, even if they leave, you come out on top. Okay, now my own long story of failure and some success. So when I first started in barista competitions, I had actually coached or helped coach Phil Robertson, my boss. He competed with a really fruity coffee, and the judges said that coffee shouldn't taste like fruit, so he got 5th. And then he went to nationals and got 5th. But it was super inspiring. Then I started working in coffee in barista competitions. And I would say that there were a bunch of things that I directly got out of those competitions before I won. So the first one is you will develop knowledge. Even at, I've competed 7 years now. I've gone through all the motions of practicing and getting ready, and I know the score sheets. But every single year, there's things that I can work on and learn and develop. And so for any baristas out there, I think knowledge is a huge part of it. And another thing I'd mention that I think for me, I think one of the hardest hurdles for getting into competition is it comes around once a year. And it's hard to sort of measure the value of competition with all the effort it takes, all the risk that it takes, all the investment that it takes. And so my hope in talking about my time as a barista is to show you that there's value in it and to start considering it as early as possible before it comes up and sort of sneaks up on you. So knowledge is, I think, the top one. Is you have to learn so much, you have to develop so much, you have to work on your skill sets. The other one, so basically it took me 5 years before I won. And something that I really appreciate and it has carried through is the networking that you can do at competitions. And I think this holds two things. We don't always live in the same cities for the rest of our lives, and I think barista competitions will give you sort of the ability to move between cafes and to know people that are doing inspiring things, and you can continue to learn, and you can be inspired by people even if you don't work with them. I think that sort of communication is super important to the industry, the idea of cross-pollination. Like every cafe I go to, there's something new that I see that I wish we did, and I think that cross-pollination happens more easily in the realm of competition rather than in a cafe where someone's working and you're a customer. So I think that's super, super important. I think something that competition does for you is you have someone sit down with you and say, hey, you're kind of bad at all these things. And so it really shows you areas of improvement. That when I went to nationals the first year, I got totally destroyed. Amber Fox gave me one of my lowest scores ever. And then when I went to Worlds, I got, I don't know if you guys know the scoring system, but there's a score from 0 to 6. You can't get a 0.5, it's either a 0 or a 1, and I got a 1 on a whole bunch of things. And so even then, there's always time to learn, and you basically learn from your failures, because judges are instructed and trained to be really honest with you and really cut and dry. And so I think in a cafe it's often hard to get that sort of feedback. It's hard to accept that feedback, but in a competition setting they will tell you, and it's really, they do it in a really friendly manner, and you can really identify areas as a barista where you need to improve and work. The other big one for me that while I was competing is that competing in barista competitions will help you in your coffee career. And I think this is something that other countries don't have as much of. So if I go to Europe, there is all sorts of certifications as a barista. If I go to Australia, there's all sorts of certifications. Even in the United States, there's lots of certifications. Those certifications both don't exist in terms of training right now in Canada, but they also aren't really well known. So passing like an SCA, a level 1 barista course, doesn't really mean much to someone here. So the only way that you can sort of make a name for yourself, the only way that you can sort of show I have this skill set is actually competing. And I hope in the future this changes. But I think it's really important right now because you can say, hey, I've competed, I've done these things, and it's sort of this thing that will allow you to do other things. Because something that I think is a massive problem in the coffee industry is there's lots of barista jobs, and then there's like one trainer job, and one roaster job, and one manager job. And it is really cutthroat, and the ability to sort of have that skill set and show that on your resume will allow you to move into areas of expertise and knowledge that are interesting to you. And I experienced that directly through competition. I know I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had competing, without competing. For roasters and cafe owners, I think that the competitions are really underutilized for you because I think that there's lots you can do. Every single time we've had a competitor, they've shared their knowledge across the board. They've come back excited. They've come back like really eager to learn and share things. And it's been invaluable for us. Like if you think of, imagine the dollars that you spend paying a trainer to go through every single person individually, and then compare that to the dollars that you spend where you have someone that is essentially practicing for the most part on their own time. Like any time I've competed, it's been on my own time. And they're bringing that knowledge and that passion to your cafe. And they're sharing that with baristas. They know your product better than anyone. So really, in that sense, it is super, super cheap in terms of a training program because they basically have everything laid out for them, what they need to do. And they're going to practice that and practice that and practice that. And when I compare that to the amount of time that I've spent training people and paying both your trainer and the employee getting trained, like the savings on just having a barista compete are huge. And the other one I think for cafe owners is that isn't leveraged enough is you can actually have good publicity and good sales from baristas, not even winning, but competing. So if a barista is competing with the coffee that you're serving, they know it better than anything else. They can talk about it. Their skills are going to be up there. Even like unless it's a very busy news day, barista competitions get covered. They're like the things people like reading about. So as a business owner, if you can leverage those things, if you can talk about competition, like I personally feel like Monogram was built off competition. I don't think that we continue to be successful because of competition. I think competition brings customers in your door once. It doesn't bring them in twice. So I think we've done other things to sort of hold people. But I actually believe that our initial start was because people knew that Jeremy and I had competed and sort of wanted to check it out because it's an easy story to talk about. So I think that side of things is something that business owners really need to look in. I think that there's massive benefits beyond just money, but I know that we're all trying to run businesses. So from the training aspect, from the publicity aspect, I definitely think that it's worthwhile. And then I kind of want to talk about where coffee is going with competitions. I know Mike has an announcement, so everything might change after he talks about this, but I think one of the huge things that I feel as a barista is that if people had competed before me and sort of set the stage for competitions, I wouldn't be here. So like Kyle Straw's here, barista champion extraordinaire. And I think of like what Artigiano did for Canadian competitions is they set it up so that there was a competition to be there. And so if we don't compete, if we don't support competitions, we don't do all these things, we're not just making the decision for ourselves not to compete, we're actually making the decision for future baristas that maybe they're not even baristas yet, but we're actually limiting people's options. We're making that decision whether we know it or not. If I don't attend competitions, if I don't support competitions, and they fade away in Canada, it basically means that every future barista won't get to compete. So I think of how long we haven't had brewers, how long we haven't had cup tasters. These are good competitions, and they're competitions that are pretty affordable, they're easy to get into, And we haven't had them because we've made a conscious and unconscious decision not to have them. And we're actually, so when you don't support competitions, you are choosing not to allow other baristas to enjoy them. I know it's a downer, but I think that the other thing that we need to do is competition doesn't have to happen just once a year. I think for me personally, the only reason I got into competition is that I got to experience it indirectly. I got to help someone, I thought it was interesting. Otherwise it feels like you're jumping into the deep end. I think as baristas and shop owners and roasters, we need to create events that occur all year long. So I think things like the coffee potluck are great. I know they're not competition based, but they allow you to interact with people. I think that what we're trying to do in our shop is have friendly competitions so that people are used to that atmosphere. Competition only comes up once a year. It can be really daunting and scary, and I think it's worthwhile trying to create friendly competitions. So when you do compete, you know the sensation, you know what it feels like, and you can go in and really sort of be comfortable in that scenario. And then coming back to the competitions that we don't have, I think we really need to support cup tasters and Brewers Cup. I think that the problem with barista competitions is that it invites a certain personality. Like I mentioned, it's a really good way to move up in the industry, and what's happened is that people that are better public speakers, and I'm not saying I'm a good public speaker, but people that were better public speakers or more outgoing, or even more vocal in saying, I want to do this, have moved up in coffee. And I actually think, in many senses, I think this is part of the, it's contributed to the rise of men moving up the ranks of coffee, because men are more aggressive and will say what they want. And I think that if you have if you have other competitions that cater to other personality types, that cater to more collaborative things, or if you are not a big public speaker, we need to support these things. Because right now, in just supporting barista competitions, we're actually only supporting one style of personality and one story that can be told. So I think it's essential that in the future we move to support other competitions. Those are my big ones. Overall, I think that we need to move forward with competitions. I think that there's value, whether you're a roaster or a cafe owner. I will now pass it over to Mike. What we'll be doing afterwards, after Mike's talk, we'll do a Q&A. And while the movie is playing, I brought back some coffee from Australia. Some of it's weird, some of it's delicious. You'll be the judge of which one's which. Thanks, guys.